Good night, this is Fumi Sleepy Time Stories. Tonight's bedtime story is about to begin. Once upon a time, in a dreamlike kingdom, there was a golden apple tree planted in the king's courtyard. Every year, when the golden apples ripened, the king would count them daily. However, one year during the harvest season, the king discovered that every night, one golden apple would disappear. No matter how hard they searched, no one could find the thief, which made the king furious. The king ordered the old gardener to keep watch under the tree every night. On the first night, the old gardener sent his eldest son to guard the tree, but at midnight the eldest son fell asleep. The next morning he returned home and told the gardener that another golden apple had gone missing, but he had no idea who had taken it. The next night, the old gardener sent his second son to keep watch. However, at midnight, the second son also fell asleep the following morning. He returned home and reported the same thing: the golden apple was gone, and the thief remained unknown. On the third night, the old gardener had no choice but to send his youngest son. At first, he was reluctant, as his youngest son was still very young, and he feared for his safety. But with no one else left to take turns, he eventually agreed. That night, the youngest son lay under the tree, keeping watch. When the clock struck midnight, he heard a rustling sound from above. Looking up carefully, he saw a golden bird flying toward the tree from an unknown direction. The bird shimmered in the night, its feathers gleaming as if coated in pure gold. The boy was mesmerized by the bird's dazzling glow. The golden bird began pecking at one of the apples. Realizing what was happening, the boy quickly regained his senses, grabbed his small bow and arrow and aimed at the bird. He shot an arrow, but it only struck off a single golden feather from the bird's tail. Frightened, the bird immediately flew away. The next morning, the youngest son told his father everything, relieved that he no longer had to stay up all night. The old gardener quickly reported the incident to the king and presented him with the golden feather. Upon hearing this, the king was overjoyed and immediately summoned his ministers for a discussion. The ministers all agreed that the golden feather was of immeasurable value, worth more than all the kingdom's wealth combined. However, the king declared, "A single feather is of no use to me. What I desire is the entire golden bird." The old gardener returned home and relayed the king's command to his three sons. The eldest son, believing it to be an easy task, immediately volunteered. "I will find the golden bird," he declared before setting off. After traveling for some time, the eldest son came to the edge of a forest. There, he saw a red-furred fox sitting by the trees. Finding it rare to see such an animal, he instinctively reached for his bow, ready to claim it as his prey. Just then, the fox spoke. "Please don't shoot me. I can offer you advice. I know you are searching for the golden bird. Tonight, you will reach a village where you must spend the night. When you arrive, you will see two inns. One will be lively, grand, and filled with guests. The other will be small, run down, and nearly empty. Whatever you do, do not enter the grand inn. Instead, stay in the smaller one." The eldest son was astonished. A talking beast, and it knew about his quest. Should he trust its words? Half believing, he still decided to shoot at the fox. But he missed, and the fox darted away into the forest. Shrugging, he continued his journey. That night, as predicted, he arrived at a village with two inns, one filled with merriment and music, and the other old and uninviting. The eldest son thought, "That fox told me to stay in the rundown inn, but the lively one looks far more enjoyable. It's just one night. What harm could it do?" Without hesitation, he entered the grand inn, joining the other guests in feasting and drinking. From that night on, he forgot all about the golden bird and immersed himself in a life of indulgence. When the eldest son failed to return or send any word, the old gardener sent his second son on the same quest, like his older brother. The second son encountered the red fox, received the same warning, and similarly tried to shoot it. The fox escaped just as before. Reaching the village, he saw his older brother waving at him from the window of the grand inn. "If my brother is in there, then the fox must have been lying," he thought. So the second son also entered the grand inn, quickly losing himself in a life of pleasure, completely forgetting about the golden bird. Days passed, and with no news from his two sons, the old gardener decided to set out himself. Seeing this, the youngest son, worried about his father, swore, "I will find the golden bird and bring my brothers back." The old gardener, who loved his youngest son the most, feared he too would never return. But after much persuasion, he finally allowed the boy to go. When the youngest son reached the forest, he encountered the red fox. Listening to the fox's advice, he did not try to shoot it, but instead thanked it sincerely. Pleased, the fox said, "Sit on my tail, and I will take you there faster." The boy accepted the offer and climbed onto the fox's soft tail. The fox ran swiftly, leaping over bushes and rocks. The wind rushed past the boy's ears as they sped forward. Upon reaching the village, the boy got off the fox's back. Remembering its advice, he entered the humble, run-down inn without hesitation, though its exterior was worn. The inside was warm and inviting. That night, he slept peacefully. At dawn, as the boy was about to set off again, he found the red fox waiting at the door. The fox told him, "Continue forward, and you will find a white castle. In front of the castle, many soldiers will be sleeping on the ground. Do not wake them. Once inside, walk straight ahead to a small wooden house. Inside, you will find a wooden bird cage containing the golden bird. Next to it will be an ornate golden cage. No matter what, do not put the bird in the golden cage, or you will regret it." Then the fox extended its tail again, signaling for the boy to climb on. Upon reaching the White Castle, everything was exactly as the fox had described. Careful not to wake the sleeping soldiers, the boy tiptoed forward. To his surprise, the castle gates were slightly open, just enough for one person to slip through. Inside, he found the wooden house, and in the center of the room hung a wooden cage. Inside the cage was the golden bird, its feathers gleaming brilliantly. Below it sat a magnificent golden cage, along with 3 missing golden apples. The boy thought, "It's a shame to keep such a beautiful bird in such a plain wooden cage." Forgetting the fox's warning, he opened the wooden cage and was about to transfer the bird into the golden one when the golden bird suddenly let out a loud cry. The sound instantly woke all the soldiers, who captured the boy and took him before their king. The next morning, the boy was put on trial. After hearing the case, the court declared him a thief and sentenced him to punishment. However, The king offered him a chance to atone for his crime. He explained, "I once owned a golden horse that runs as fast as lightning, but it has gone missing. If you find it, not only will I spare you, but I will also let you take the golden bird." Feeling hopeless, the boy set off once more, regretting his mistake. Just then, the red fox appeared. Again, "See what happens when you don't listen to me," it said. "But if you follow my advice from now on, you will find the golden horse." Determined to do better this time, the boy nodded, ready to hear the fox's next instructions. The fox said, "Just keep walking forward, and you'll see a blue castle. The golden horse is in the stable inside. Though there are guards nearby, they are all fast asleep. You only need to put the old leather saddle on the horse, and you can take it away. But remember, never put the golden saddle on it." The fox carried the youngest son to the front of the blue castle. At the stable, they indeed found the guards sleeping soundly. As soon as the youngest son saw the golden horse, he forgot the fox's instructions again. The moment he tried to place the golden saddle on the horse neighed loudly, waking the guards. The stable hands immediately shouted for the soldiers to capture him. The next morning, the youngest son was once again brought to court, and he was sentenced to punishment. However, the king gave him a chance to redeem himself. If he could bring back a beautiful princess from a distant land, he would be spared, and the golden horse would belong to him, having no other choice. The youngest son set off on his journey with a heavy heart. The red fox appeared again and said, "Why didn't you listen to me? If you had, you would already have the golden bird and the golden horse by now." "Very well, I will give you another piece of advice. Keep moving forward, and you will see a purple castle. At midnight, the princess of the castle will step outside the gates. You just need to kiss her, and she will agree to leave with you. But whatever you do, do not let her go to bid farewell to her parents." The fox carried the youngest son to the purple castle. At midnight, the beautiful princess appeared. The youngest son, who had been waiting in ambush, quickly stepped forward and kissed her. Just as the fox had said, the princess immediately agreed to leave with him. Before leaving, she pleaded with him to let her say goodbye to her parents. At first he refused, but when he saw her looking so sad, he relented. As soon as she entered the king's chambers, the youngest son was captured by the guards once again. The king said to him, "If you can remove the mountain that blocks my view from my window within 8 days, you may have my beautiful daughter." How could one person possibly remove an entire mountain? As the youngest son fell into despair, the red fox appeared again. "Go to sleep," the fox said. "I will dig it for you." The next morning, the mountain had miraculously disappeared. The king had no choice but to honor his promise and allowed the beautiful princess to leave with the youngest son. On the journey back, the red fox said to the youngest son, "I can help you obtain 3 treasures: the beautiful princess, the golden horse, and the golden bird." The youngest son asked, "Really? How?" The fox explained, "Go to the king of the blue castle and pretend to hand over the princess. Once you mount the golden horse to leave, shake hands with the princess and use that moment to pull her onto the horse with you. That way, you can escape unharmed." Everything went smoothly. The youngest son rode the golden horse and reunited with the fox and the princess. Then the fox instructed, "When you arrive at the White Castle, Leave the princess and me by the gate. Ride the golden horse into the castle to meet the king. But no matter what, do not dismount. Once the golden bird is in your hands, leave immediately. Everything went according to plan. The youngest son obtained the golden bird, then reunited with the fox and the princess outside the castle. As they passed through a forest, the fox said, "Now you must end my life. Cut off my head and my feet." But the youngest son refused. He thought it was too cruel. The fox sighed, "Very well. Then let me give you 2 more warnings. Never spend money to ransom anyone, and never sit by the riverbank." The youngest son nodded and agreed. Then the fox disappeared. The youngest son and the princess rode the golden horse on their way home. As they passed through the village where his 2 older brothers had been staying, they heard a commotion. The youngest son asked a passerby what was happening. "There are 2 men about to be executed," the person replied. At first, the youngest son intended to move on, but when he looked closer, he realized that the 2 men were his brothers. He quickly asked if there was any way to save them. "The only way is if someone is willing to give up all their money to buy their freedom," the person said. Without hesitation, the youngest son took out all of his gold and paid for his brother's release. Then he continued the journey home with them. As they traveled, they laughed and shared stories about their experiences. When they reached the forest where the youngest son had first met the red fox, the 2 older brothers exchanged a glance. "We're tired," they said. "Let's rest by the riverbank." Having complete trust in his brothers, the youngest son forgot the fox's last warning. Seeing how many treasures their younger brother had obtained, jealousy burned in the hearts of the older brothers. As soon as they reached the river, the older brothers crept up behind him and suddenly pushed him down the steep riverbank. Then they took the princess, the golden horse, and the golden bird, and returned home. Upon arriving at the palace, they presented the treasures to the king. But something was wrong. The golden horse refused to eat. The golden bird would not sing, and the beautiful princess was filled with sorrow. Meanwhile, the youngest son lay on the riverbed for a long time before he could get back on his feet. His body ached all over, but what hurt him the most was his heart. He had never imagined that his own brothers would betray him for wealth. The riverbank was steep, and he could not find a way to climb up. Just then, the fox appeared again. Though it scolded him for ignoring its advice, it still helped him out of the river by letting him grab onto its tail. The fox warned, "You should disguise yourself before returning home. Your brothers will not let you live if they see you." The youngest son followed the advice and dressed himself as a beggar before sneaking into the king's courtyard. The moment he entered, the golden horse began to eat, the golden bird started singing, and the beautiful princess smiled for the first time with the princess's help. The youngest son met the king and revealed the truth about his brothers' betrayal. The king immediately punished the older brothers and declared that the youngest son would inherit the kingdom after his passing. Many years later, on a walk through the forest, the youngest son once again encountered the red fox. This time, the fox pleaded desperately, "Please, I beg you, end my life, separate my head and feet." Seeing how sincere the fox was, the youngest son finally agreed. The moment he did, the fox transformed into a man, the long-lost brother of the beautiful princess. The end.